my pleasure to introduce Erin Jensen. Erin's presentation today focuses on peer-to-peer writing workshops, a practice that asks students to evaluate and help edit each other's work. Erin will be discussing her research on writing workshops, their benefits to students, and their potential application beyond just writing classes. Please help me in welcoming Erin.
Thank you very much. Okay. I'm one of those people that I always have a loud voice, and so I don't usually use a microphone, so this is going to be an interesting, so I'll stick it on my skirt. And so this presentation today on writing workshops really grew out of some research that I've been doing, but also, is the microphone working? I can't ever tell. But also on a conference that I was at in November, where I was on a panel with people that we were talking about. It was actually a peer tutoring conference. Most of the people there with writing center background or other kind of tutoring background. And the panel I was on was really focused on how can we take the ideas from specifically the writing center and add those techniques of having that peer-to-peer work. How can we adapt that to work within various classrooms? And on the panel, there was someone from a history instructor, a literature and languages instructor, an English instructor, and then for some reason I was representing communications, which I'm not in, but whatever. And right, sometimes you just kind of make panels work however it works. And so we gave our whole presentation and really talked about how we used writing center work within our classes, within those fields. And during the question time at the end, we're like, any questions? And somebody raised their hand and said, I am a math professor, and I want to know what is the point of what you just talked about. And we're like, oh, really? What's the point? There was a good point, right? That we should be using these techniques. And so, I kind of looked down the panel, and the various people did not want to engage in that question. And so I said, okay, to this math professor, math professor, I said, do you have your students write? And he kind of laughed, and he's like, I'm a math professor. And I was like, obviously. But do you have your students write? And he said, well, in some classes I have students write, and some I don't. Some just do math problems, right? Because it's a math class, or you're a math professor. But in my upper division classes, he said, I have my students write a paper, a research paper. And I said, okay, so on that research paper, what are your complaints about your students that write that research paper? And he's like, oh my goodness, how long do you have, right? He said, the main complaint is that students don't know how to write. And I said, is it that students don't know how to write? Or is it that maybe you're not being clear in your expectations or what you want students to be writing like? Or do you think they need more time to write the paper? Can you expand on that a little bit? And he said, you know what? There's really students that seem to really get it. They know what I want. They write really well. They turn in these fabulous papers. I can grade those, in 10 minutes. And then there are these students that totally don't get it, and it takes me hours to circle every grammar mistake they make with a red pen. And we're all kind of like, oh, that's really the point of writing, right? But anyway, that's beyond the point. I'm not going to critique him, sort of, although I am. And I said, okay, what would you like in your math class? How do you get the students that totally get it and the students that you say don't get it? How do you get them in conversation with one another? And he's like, I don't know. That's a really good idea. How do I get them in conversation with one another? And I thought, well, that's an interesting point. And so I was walking through the library one day and saw the call for proposals to this conference and thought, that might be based off this experience talking to the math professor, as well as my own experience as a teacher here at the University of Utah. What are ways to use technology to maybe help with those conversations? And I was thinking, it was just in the past presentation on 3D printing, I thought, well, my presentation is a little bit stepped down from that in terms of technology use. In terms of this presentation really focusing on one way that I use technology in my classroom that the research also supports, but how to also use Canvas to facilitate that. So I am, my name is Erin Jensen. I am a PhD student here at the U in Education, Culture, and Society with an emphasis in rhetoric and composition. Try saying that 10 times fast. right? Thank goodness for acronyms. And I really am focused on how we teach writing and best practices for writing and things like that. So this does absolutely grow out of my own research. Okay. So an overview of the presentation is going to start with what are peer review writing workshops, looking at best practices for those, the benefits of them, and then I have an IRB approved study that I did looking specifically at how L2 students respond to online writing workshops. For the purposes of this presentation, I lumped students together. So the L2, and I'll show you what I looked at. Most of the students that participated were international students and self-identified international students. However, there were a couple that were Americans but spoke 2 or 3 languages at home, and so they were also lumped in as this L2 kind of umbrella category for this purposes. Yes? Oh, sorry. It's usually English as a second language. Oh, okay. Yeah, or third or fourth, or English as a language beyond native. Good question. Sorry about that. And then I'm also going to talk about how to use Canvas, because Canvas makes it really easy to set up online writing workshops. Those of you that have taught using WebCT, when we used to use WebCT, you could set up an online writing workshop through WebCT, but it had to be through Turnitin, and it was much more difficult to set up, as well as explain to your students how to use. So Canvas has really, really simplified the process. I'm also going to show you the instructions that I give to students. I teach both in class as well as online. Obviously, the in-class students who can really walk through and model. Online is a little bit harder, but I have instructions, and I'm happy to send anyone who's interested in any of the materials that I present today. And then also an end review of why writing workshops are needed. Perhaps answering that, math professors, like, what was the point of your panel presentation, which is always what you want to hear at the end of a conference, right? Yes. Okay, so review of writing workshops. Writing workshops, peer review writing workshops are really where they're used often in writing classes. It's where you have a document, a draft that you've written of something, and you exchange it with a peer, and then you make comments on each other's papers and usually get back together and talk about it. There's a lot of different ways that's used, but they're used very, very extensive. And there's, in writing classes, I would hazard a guess that any student that you may have at the University of Utah, or at any university really, that has taken a writing class has participated in a writing workshop. There's extensive research on the classroom-based writing workshops, going back to the 80s on the use of them. These are some quotes that I pulled out on research, for instance, Carrington and Cadman, as you can see, it's in 91. All students can profit from the response they receive about their own drafts and from reading the drafts of others. One of the critiques of writing workshops is really those high-level students or students that maybe have better writing ability, and there's so many problematic issues with those language, and I recognize that. For the purpose of this very short presentation, I'm going to use that problematic language. With students that maybe are not as high-level writers or struggle in whatever ways, can really the two groups of students work together and have profitable, again, sort of problem, but can work on writing and come with comments and effective changes. And the research really supports that, yes, that is possible to happen. As they also said, even students who struggle with their own writing can give sound advice to their peers. Fern and Bauman, 2003, writing workshops support the considerable needs of all writers. And extensive research on all of this. Okay, online-based writing workshops is not as well studied, and that's partly because online is relatively, in the history of composition land, is still relatively new. And then online-based writing workshops and the impact on L2 students is even less well studied, although there are increasingly, obviously, articles. Computers and Composition Journal has really started publishing quite a bit on online writing workshops and the effects on L2 students. Interestingly, though, most of the research has really focused on online writing workshops, has focused on writing workshops in the math and sciences, not in writing classes. And which is really interesting because a lot of times we think of writing workshops very much writing-based, communication-based classes, not math and sciences. Where they're normally used is either in hybrid classes where you meet on campus 1 or 2 times a week, and then the rest of the time is online, or on purely online courses. So best practices, this is both for online as well as classroom-based, is to have some kind of handout for students. You know, those of you who have taught writing or incorporate writing, it's so often when you have students talk about their writing with each other, say, hey, great paper, smiley face, right? Or really bad paper, rewrite, frowny face. And so, you know, that's not super helpful in terms of comments. There's not much you can do with a smiley face or a frowny face. And freshmen that I teach here at the University of Utah still do frowny faces and smiley faces. So, you know, elevate that a little bit. Studies have shown that if you add some kind of handout to kind of guide students into thinking about issues a little bit more deeply, that you get better comments that way. In my own classes, I tell students I grade your comments, and so if they don't actually provide, you know, substantial comments, I sometimes grade them down, or at least tell them, hey, remember, you're supposed to actually give helpful comments back. So these are just 2 that I pulled off of the handout that I use in my class. So like introduction, you know, evaluate the effectiveness of the introduction, how does the writer introduce the topic, and they have to go through as they're doing the writing workshops and answer these questions, evidence, et cetera, et cetera. Best practice also is to give students guidelines, so it's not just, you know, evaluate whatever you feel like evaluating. Again, that goes along with kind of a handout. Model the process. In class, it's much easier to model the process because they're staring at me, and we can go through and give sample papers. Online, I still have students model, or I model for students. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there of peer-to-peer interactions on papers and what that looks like. And I usually have students either, and again, I can provide these if you're so inclined, watch YouTube videos of peer-to-peer interactions. I also, you know, will go through a paper and kind of show some questions and comments and things like that that I'm looking for as well. And then provide time for the process. So the study that I actually am going to talk a little bit about, I only gave students 24 hours to evaluate each other's papers, and most people said, oh, 24 hours, it's not enough time. So now I usually do between 2 or 3 days, and I found that to be much more effective in terms of giving students enough time to complete. Okay, so benefits of online peer tutoring workshops. Students benefit from getting feedback on their writing. Students always benefit from getting feedback. Anybody who writes benefits from getting feedback on writing. To have someone else look at what you wrote is helpful. The other thing is students really benefit from both reading and commenting on other students' papers. I can't tell you as a writing instructor how many times students have been like, I don't know what to write. I don't know what you want. I don't know what format to put it in. And I say, okay, you know what? Bring something to the draft workshop that we're going to do. Something. Just write something. It can just be no punctuation, flow of ideas. Just bring something. They come, they read other people's writing and go, oh, I really liked what that person did. I really like their topic, or I like their format, or I like their thesis, or whatever. And that really helps generate some ideas. Because writing should not be, you know, an isolated process. There should be, you know, in an ideal setting, some influence from other people on it. And so online writing workshops really provide that. Students have greater flexibility and convenience, again, that time issue. So that first, the study that I had, a 24-hour time period, note to self, that was a little short. But, you know, all students have to participate in it, or they have, I should say, the opportunity to participate. So somebody, one of the students I interviewed said, students have to give you feedback, where in class not everybody does. And then new to Canvas and online writing workshops, just this semester new, is now you can have anonymous reviewers. Before it was always their name would always appear. Now anonymous is fantastic. Okay, so the study that I keep referring to is an IRB approved study. I started out with 2 writing 2010 classes, and I'm currently up to about 10. These are not my students, they're other classes. Although I do teach writing 2010, or I have. And so these all students, they completed an online workshop on a rough draft of a paper, and nobody that participated ever done an online writing workshop before. They had done a classroom-based one, so they did have some knowledge about what it is. And then before they participated in the online writing workshop, I went in and walked them through the steps of what it looked like and how they were going to submit and modeled, right, as well as gave them guidelines on what they were going to be doing. So process, they uploaded to Canvas. Canvas will randomly assign. You can either manually assign or you can do it randomly. I usually just do randomly because it's less work. But if you want specific people to work with specific people, you can set that up as well. It's really easy to do so. So Canvas randomly assigned, and then students were given 24 hours. And then after they finished the online peer review, they filled out a questionnaire, and then I also interviewed students as well on that one. And on the questionnaire, they identified their major, their gender, and their international status, which is how I determined L2 students. Okay, so benefits. These are specific to L2 students. This is the feedback that they provided about their participation with online writing workshops. Random assignment at peer reviews. One L2 student said, I like that the program chose who you had to review. And I actually interviewed this student and I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, you know what, it's hard when I'm sitting in a class or I'm in an online class. This person was in a classroom-based class. And he said, you know, it's really hard because I feel like I always go to the same people to review my papers, and they're always my friends. It's really hard for me to get up and walk across the room and ask someone else to peer review my paper. I feel very much like nobody wants to other than the people I know. So that, that random assignment was beneficial. Time and flexibility. Another L2 student said, I feel more comfortable making comments on papers and fixing their mistakes when they aren't sitting right next to me. And I think we all could agree with that. That sounds kind of nice, that someone is not right there wondering, as you get out that pen and you start circling and writing, right? Yeah. The other thing that I got in time and flexibility, both for, I looked at L1, which is English as a first language students as well. Overall, people really like the flexibility of these online writing workshops, that they could be, sit at 2 a.m. on their couch in their pajamas and evaluate papers. I mean, very nice flexibility in that one. The anonymous piece. So an L2 student said, students don't trust my comments because English isn't my first language. This way, the other students wouldn't judge me. And this one's a huge one with L2 students, that feeling of being judged for language ability or perceived language ability. And so and especially now that is completely anonymous, I usually with my students would have them submit with just their student ID in an attempt to try and cut down on some of that bias and name bias. But there's still the bias so with that anonymous piece, feeling less judged is huge. Another student said, not seeing the author's face as I was reviewing enabled me to be more honest with my comments. And a third student said, I would be more honest because the person didn't know who reviewed it. So again, within that class space, not having kind of that peer pressure of, wait, why did you say that type thing. So it took away from that. So these were the benefits to students. Okay, so why Canvas and why using Canvas to set up the writing workshops? So the Canvas platform really facilitates the creation of these online workshops. I previously worked in the Writing Center here at the University of Utah, and I can't tell you how many professors would come in and say, help me figure out how to help my students become better writers. And help me figure out how can I don't want to take away from my time in my class to try and teach writing. I'm not a writing instructor. I'm a biology, chemistry, math, etc. How can I use these techniques? Great, they're good, I'm on board, you convinced me, Erin, right? But I don't want to take away from time. So there is a biology professor here at the U that uses online writing workshops in his biology classes. And what he does is he sets them up as, they're online, and he uses it more as a makeup assignment. So it's completely voluntary if students want to participate in them. He sets them online, says here's, for whatever, I think his is a lab report. And students can choose if they participate or not. And if they do, then they get, not extra credit, but they can make up points that they missed on other assignments. And that seems to have worked extremely well in his biology classes. The students are getting the benefits of having other people read their lab reports as well as reading other people's lab reports, but it is not a forced assignment, and right? So things like that can be, and Canvas, like I said, really, really, really facilitates the use of these online writing workshops. So in Canvas, when you set it up, and I'm going to show you some screenshots that I hope show up. When you set up an assignment, and you scroll through, it'll say there's an option to add peer reviews on the assignment. There's an option to either manual assign. Once you click the peer review little button, it'll say, do you want to manually assign or do you want to automatically assign? And you can choose how many papers people assign. I usually do 2, but however many you want to do on that one. There's that option for anonymous reviewers, which is, it wasn't there last semester, so I think it's new this semester. And then there is also an option to add and Turnitin. If people are familiar with Turnitin, it's a plagiarism checking software that's also embedded in Canvas. And so you can also add that to your online workshops if you are so inclined. And then I also provide a handout to my students to kind of walk them through the process. So, it's so super, can anyone see that? Probably not. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about it as if you can. And so this is the creating assignment. This is what you get. It says like assignment group, designate grade S, submission type, online entry. This was for an online class that I taught. Group assignment, no. Peer reviews, and it just says peer reviews right here, and you click on it, which is actually over here on this other side. So required peer reviews, I clicked on it, and it says here, how to assign them. Do you want manually or automatic? And that's where you can click it in. For some reason, I chose manual, although never mind. And then here's where it says, the anonymous piece if you want to make those anonymous peer reviews. And then on this next, let's go to the next one, which you also can't see, so I'm still just going to talk about it as if you can. This is choosing the automatic peer review. I put in 2 reviews per user. I find that usually if you do more than 2, students get a little bit overwhelmed depending on the assignment and the length of it. You can assign when reviews go out. I usually do it 10 minutes after the draft is due. So students upload a draft, and then 10 minutes later they're assigned reviewers. Again, you can do the anonymous one, and then you just, the assignment when you do it. So it's all built into Canvas, which is a huge change from WebCT, and is a really nice change because it makes it so much easier to set up. So instructions to students. I wanted to show you my instructions. If you want a copy, you're welcome to email me. Not saying that this is the end-all of instructions, but this is what I cannot read. So this is what I give to students. Submit your rough draft. This is like an annotated bibliography. This is what they see. So after they've submitted their rough drafts, it'll say, not find and replace. It says over here where the red circle is, oh, well, okay, it's kind of interesting. Technology for the win. Okay, it says where the red circle is, it'll list the people that they've been assigned to review. With the anonymous piece, I actually haven't used it. I'm not teaching this semester, but definitely with that anonymous, I'm assuming it shows up as something. But it shows up right as the 2 that they have, so that they see it. And then I blew that up so that they can see that over here, this is where the names would appear, okay? And they click on those to get into the documents that they're going to do a peer review on. Again, here's how they open it. I like them to make their comments in Canvas because then I can see their comments, the student can see their comments, as opposed to just opening it in Word and typing out comments. The handout that I give to them, you can put it actually into Canvas, the handout, so like evaluate the introduction, evaluate evidence. You can have that go along so as they're looking at the papers, they can fill it out at the same time. Or I will also post it so they can just type up their answers in Word, and then they can upload it into their comments as they're evaluating the papers. And so that is how to do it. Here is what it looks like. So at the top, they can use the comment feature in Canvas just like we evaluate papers. Students have the same access to it, comments, as well as over here on this side. they can put in comments as well. Although in my classes, I say I want most of your comments actually on the draft itself. I find that easier when students go back to revise. And then on the side in the comments, have kind of your overall. Anyway, and then once someone is finished, Canvas will save it as they make comments, so they don't have to worry about saving it as they go along. It just does it automatically. And as soon as they are done, students then can get in and see the comments that people have made on theirs. Anyway, and so then there's the, when's it due, when it will be posted, etc. And I use this with my, as I said, with my online students as well, and find that this handout cuts down on a lot of questions while facilitating the presentation. Okay. Let's go. So why use online writing workshops? Well, Canvas is available to all University of Utah classes. I would think if there's people from outside the University of Utah here, most of the time there's various ways to also set this up with whatever your school uses. Canvas is easy to use. I like easy. I am not a technology person. Here I am at this conference, but easy. Easy is nice, okay? Workshops have been proven, the research is out there, that they really benefit students writing, and that they really benefit as well L2 students writing. And then there's a really small list of references. Any questions?